Welcome to the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Delegro, your host, and my guest today is Kevin Hubschmann. He is the founder of Laugh.Events. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Things are going great. I'm down here in Texas. You are in Brooklyn, if I recall.
Yeah.
Brooklyn,
New York.
Well, I got to get this out of the way. I'm from Boston originally, so Yankees fan. What's your affiliation here?
I'd say our biggest rivalry might come with a little Giants Patriots, and I think in there I do apologize.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Well, the Pats are back. I think they've got. Looks like
That's good. The Giants are nowhere near back.
Yeah. Well, if you would have said to me last year after a 4 and whatever the heck season they had that they would be 8-2 right now, I'd bet everything I had against it.
It's Vrabel. Vrabel's doing his thing.
Yeah, and they got a good young quarterback too. You can't win in the NFL without a quarterback.
Oh yeah, he's the prototypical Pats quarterback. He's gonna thrive.
Yeah, and he can run too a little bit when he has to. I don't like running quarterbacks; they get hurt. But at any rate, we could talk about sports for a couple of hours, Kevin. But happy to have you on the show. So, what piqued my interest about you're the founder of this Laugh.Events company. And you're a former IT salesman, right? Software salesman, but you're trying to work comedy into sales. So kind of tell me what you're doing here, how you founded this company, why you founded it, and how you went from sales to comedy.
Yeah. So I always kind of did them next to each other. So I was the first 10 employees, first salesperson at this company, Splash. We sold enterprise event marketing software.
Okay.
And, I was still kind of trying to get my feet. They hired me because they were like, maybe you could do sales. Like it was that kind of loose in terms of putting me in the position. And so I was also just still figuring out what my interests and hobbies were. So I was in New York City and right down the road, was these great improv theaters. And my two brothers and my best friend, we decided to start an improv group called the Brothers in Flaws.
Okay.
And we go to my brother's apartment, we'd move all the furniture out of the way, and for 3 hours a week, we would do improv with a private instructor. And it was amazing. I mean, it was so much fun. We were having a blast, laughing like crazy. And, really, I thought that that's where it ended. But then I started to take those skills, those soft skills that you learn in improv, like listening and effective communication and going off script. And I started to implement that into my work life, most specifically my sales job. And, I started to listen better with customers. I started to shut up more, frankly. And I started to be like, okay, how can I, really be hyper curious on these calls and try to really understand and extract what their problems are and validate those problems. And so I was really just taking these skills that I was learning on the improv stage and applying them into my sales role. And so that was the first time I realized, like, whoa, these comedy skills have an impact into my sales role. And so I kept going with it. I kept doing improv. I eventually, the group broke up and I went and started working, doing training at the Upright Citizens Brigade, this great theater in New York City. Eventually I started getting into stand-up comedy where I learned a whole new slew of skills.
Yeah.
And stand-up can be brutal. And so I bombed like crazy. I learned how to absolutely bomb and be okay with that and have those calluses and learn that, like, hey, what good can I take from these failures? So that was one of the lessons I learned there is like, okay, in all of this failure, what's one lesson or one joke or one thing that I can take from it? And that was another thing. And then it was, okay, let me tweak it and edit it. And I learned, just like I did in my sales role, how can I say the least amount of words, but come across with the most amount of value? And so the stand-up started to help me on my pitching side of things. And also, just like in sales, you need to be okay with failure.
Yeah.
And it was another, exposure therapy I was able to get. into failing a lot. So that was where comedy and sales were mixed in with each other.
Yeah, you got me thinking. Stand-up comedy. There's no bailout. You're on the stage by yourself with a mic. There's no like, hey, can we take a time out here? I mean, like you said, and it got me thinking about like one of people's biggest fears is public speaking. And I think over time, if you're a salesman, you've got to be comfortable in front of a group of people. I mean, if you're not, you won't be as successful. The most successful salespeople I've seen are the ones that can walk into a room, give a presentation, and really command the room, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a big part of stand-up is being able to say, hey, I've got the microphone, the audience is here, and I'm the one in charge for the next 5 minutes, and you have to deal with hecklers, you have to deal with people shouting stuff out to throw you off, and you have to figure out how to navigate those waters. And there's just it goes back into getting, like you said, like how do you go in, command a room, know that you have a certain allotted amount of time, and you have to make it work, and you can't just be like, I'm out, because that looks way worse. But also it's like a very good feeling to be like, okay, that didn't go well, and it wasn't that bad. I'm here. I survived it.
That's a great
the next
point.
time you come into it.
The
next time you get into it, you're like, this wasn't so bad. I don't have to be so tense going into it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can even say that personally for this podcast. I remember when I first started this 5 years ago, I was a nervous wreck, right? Then I did a few episodes and I'm like, okay, that wasn't so bad. Yeah, I can critique myself and say, yeah, you can be better. You weren't that great. But like I woke up the next day, life didn't stop,
Yeah, and that's, I think, the key is, there are some stuff I can work on. And, that is what, if you become obsessive and interested in making your craft better, then that failure is just data. And, the more that you fail, the more data that you're going to get. And the less amount that you fail, the less data that you're going to get. And you're going to kind of just stay stagnant as whether that's a salesperson, a public speaker, a stand-up comedian. It's the people that don't take chances and don't put themselves in uncomfortable environments. It's those types of people that are going to kind of stay stagnant in where they are and not be able to grow from, the bad situations they might have put themselves in.
100%. You got to get out of your comfort zone. As much as most of us inherently, stay away from uncomfortable situations. In order to grow, I think you really have to get out of your comfort zone. And like your point earlier, it wasn't that bad. Like you do things, you're like, okay, I can do this, right? I wish I had learned that earlier in my career.
Sometimes it is that bad. Sometimes it is so bad, but like you do it enough. It's like I remember I would take my friends, they'd see me doing open mics, and I'd take my friends to do open mics with me. And they would come out of it going, I am never doing that again. That was brutal. And I had already done it like 20 times. So I was like, I already knew it was brutal going into it. But I knew how to navigate the waters better. And I knew to not let certain things bring me down. But I also knew like, okay, here's maybe how I can win the room over a little bit easier if things don't go well. Or, hey, how do I prepare better so that I don't feel so, nervous up there and I can be more authentically myself? How do I put myself in lower stakes reps like this so that that muscle just keeps building so you don't have that fear when you're trying something new? And that was always the funny thing, like seeing my people I bring along to an open mic that didn't have an experience compared to me who already had all these other experiences under my belt. And, the delta was so huge. And that was just because I had more exposure to it. And that allowed me to keep going versus them that said, man, because those first 2, 3, 4, maybe even 10 times are hard. And once you get over that hump, you know what to expect.
Yeah. You slow down a little bit. You're not up there like sweating bullets every time. Right.
Yeah.
So these open mic nights, like, how long do you typically go up for? I think you mentioned 5 minutes early. Is that pretty standard, 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, it's pretty standard, 5 minutes, and I think it's funny. A lot of people who do stand up comedy for the first time are like, "I need 10, I need 15. Give me that. Give me more time. I got a lot to say." And then you realize like stand up comedy is not just like you talking with a buddy at a bar. It's very meticulous.
Yeah,
You're trying to get up there, and the more you do it, the more you realize that it's like jazz. It's a rhythm. You have to get people laughing probably every like they say 8 to 13 seconds. You never
sure.
want to go more than 30 seconds without a laugh. And if you're going to wait that long, you want to like really hit them hard.
Yeah,
And you start to see that there's a rhythm to it and you start to try to keep going with it. And eventually I moved away from open mics as most people do, but most people go into comedy clubs. I decided I'm going to go and do my own comedy show. And that was how I really started to break out as a comedian, get more reps, because these mics were really tough. And the audiences are usually other comedians who are waiting to go up themselves and really don't want to give you a laugh.
sure. Yeah,
So I said, let me go and I'll start my own comedy show. And that's how I started Laughed Out Events. Was I want to give myself more exposure and I want to do more than 5 minutes if I want to do it, but it's on my own terms. And I want to invite my friends to come and be in the audience, but I don't want them to just watch me. I'm an amateur. So let me bring the best comedians in New York onto the stage. And so I started filling our lineups with people that were the best comedians in the city. And so the shows were awesome. And I got to host in the beginning. I got to enjoy that experience as an MC and a host. But I also got to do like jokes in between and try different stuff.
sure.
And, that was really where it started to take off when I said, hey, let me take this experience back into my own hands instead of letting like the open mic environment dictate how good I can get.
Yeah. So let's tie this back to sales. You touched on it a little bit earlier. So obviously I'm a sales guy. How are you tying this back to sales? And do you do like sales training, like to try to incorporate this into, the sales industry?
Yeah, so to keep going with our story, I did these comedy shows. The first comedy show that I ever did was at my office. So it was the first time that and they had like a stage. It was like a proper setup. It was really awesome, like stage lighting, it was awesome. But, that was the first time I brought like humor into the workplace, and it was you just saw that people were starving for
Yeah.
it. And I also, again, I was getting better at it, and I was able to speak better publicly and be more comfortable in these uncomfortable situations. So, we started, the business kept going into corporate comedy and doing corporate, booking comedians and, virtual comedy shows. And we blew up in the pandemic and it was really great. But then as it relates back to what we're talking about, we launched something called Laughing in Development, which is using applied improv and applied stand-up for sales teams, for marketing teams, for every type of team that's looking to do team building. But when it comes to sales, that's really where my expertise lived, because I had, about 7 years of experience as an enterprise software salesperson who was doing 6-figure deals, 7-figure deals. So I knew the experience as like, hey, discovery call, or cold call rather, into discovery call, into demo, into stakeholders, into kind of really figuring out what you have to do and create those human connections. So we do workshops that create environments. There's like hundreds of improv exercises you can choose from. So we have teams say, hey, what do you want to focus on? We want to focus on your reps listening better, or do you want to focus on them improving their pitch? Do you want to focus on them going off script? Whatever it might be. And we create these custom workshops for people. And that's the whole goal. And it could be like 2 hours, it could be a half a day, it could be a full day, depending on what teams want to do. But ultimately, the goal is to help salespeople just be more authentically themselves on the phone and not be so robotic with pitching, not be going off of a script, but actually trying to make connections with a customer. And as it relates to like humor, we're not trying to teach these people to be funny, but we're trying to teach these people to use skills that comedians use on stage and improvisers use on stage, like listening, effective communication, going off script, like I mentioned, not using words like no, but, or, trying to, there's another phrase I love to tell people, which is F your good idea. If you have a good idea that you want to say, suppressing that and telling yourself like, wait a beat, let them say more so that you can listen. So helping salespeople listen more effectively validate their customers more, and be willing to go off script in where the customer wants to take the conversation, while also making sure that you hit the points you need to hit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big believer in everything you're saying here. Because when I first was introduced to you, I was thinking you're going to work comedy into your sales pitch, but that is not the case.
Sometimes, I mean, sometimes it's like, what I like to say is like, there's been times where I've gotten deals because I've used my sense of humor. And I think that comedy I think a sense of humor is a muscle. And I think you got to work that muscle out. All these things that I talked about those are soft skills and those are muscles, and they can atrophy if you do not work them out. And that's why our trainings are effective for that, especially with AI, like doing a lot of the work for us these days. Like, we need to be able to, get into the, proverbial gym and work out those soft skills. But like, there's times where when you start to become more authentically yourself, you start to be willing to take more chances. And that might be making a joke because you're feeling the room out and you're reading the room and you're reading the relationship.
Yeah.
I made one of my biggest deals because somebody didn't email me. I was cold emailing them. I knew they were the perfect client. And I sent them a meme of the Titanic when the guy's out there looking after the wreckage, where it says like, "Is anybody out there? Can anybody hear me?" It was a meme like that when someone didn't respond to my first 9 emails. And that resulted in a huge 6-figure deal because she said, "You made me laugh. You now made a connection with me. Let's have a meeting." I did a great meeting with her. She said, "Let's bring in another stakeholder. Now let's do another meeting after that." And, that led to a multi-year 6-figure deal. And it was because I was already comfortable being myself that I felt like I could take that chance and make that comedy connection.
Yeah, that's a great story, by the way. And you're right. As sales folks, I guess we're always trying to separate ourselves. I mean, think about it. How many times have we sent an email to somebody like, "Hey, I'm John Doe, and my company's wonderful, and you should buy from us"? I mean, no one's going to respond to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like, there's a lot of things at our disposal now. I think that what's also important for managers is to give their reps permission to be themselves. I think there was one time where I'll never forget, where my boss at the time heard my call, and he knew that I was just like kind of a different person than what he heard on this call. And he said to me, "Stop being so salesman and start being more Hubschmann." And that was like huge for me, because he was like, "You can be yourself. You don't have to go off the script. You don't have to be salesy, which you're being, dial it back a bit and be more of yourself." And that, him giving me that permission allowed me to be like, okay, like now I'm a little looser. Now my shoulders are a little lighter, and I can, be a little more myself on this call and connect with people.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with that. Like in life in general, the more relaxed you are, the better you'll perform.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was like, I loved this quote, but I've heard it all the time. Anthony Davis from the Minnesota Timberwolves, he was playing in the playoffs, and he was like, the thing that he said he needed to improve, or they're like, "Is it your jump shot? Is it your rebounding? Is it your getting your teammates involved?" He goes, "I got to smile more. When I smile more, I play better." And so focusing on smiling. I think it was also J.J. McCarthy on the Minnesota Vikings. He said throughout college, he had like, I don't know if it was a tattoo, but he had a smiley face on his hand so that he looked down and remembered to smile more, because that allowed him to play better and perform better. So it's a huge difference of really having a lot more joy when you're going into things.
Yeah. So this improv stuff, I mean, I think you sent me a statistic that improv boosts the output by like 37% or something like that. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the number is that Salesforce did their sales reps did improv training to focus on active listening and empathetic communication. And this is a case study that I found. This is not something that we did ourselves, but they saw a 30% increase in sales conversions after that. I mean, think about that. That's a crazy number. 30% increase, especially when you're dealing with Salesforce dollars. Those are huge numbers that can make everyone very excited. So those are types of things that you see. And that's like, listen, or what I said, active listening, right? That was what they were focused on. Active listening and empathetic communication. And empathetic communication is what I said before, yes, and, using words like that in your statement and validating people, that's what empathy is. It's validation. It's saying, I get your feelings. Like, I get what you're going through, and I really want to help you solve it. And, so you can't get to that unless you're listening first to their problems. And if you're going in and you're like, I sell this software and it connects with this CRM and, you're going to get an ROI like this. Sure, that's great. I could read that on your website. I could read that on a one pager. Why don't you listen to me, ask me more questions, really know that like you're genuine? Because most deals that we're talking about here, correct me if I'm wrong, they have long life cycles. This isn't a transactional sale. So you're going to have to build rapport. And how you build rapport is through creating that empathy and through listening to your customers and their problems.
Yeah, I think we all run into that. I think early in our careers where we think we have to sell all the time. And I think customers, in my opinion, are sick of being sold to. One of the best compliments I ever got from a customer, he said, what I like about you, Paul? He goes, you're not always trying to sell me crap. And I know what he meant by that. Like, as a salesman, what do you mean? I'm trying to sell stuff. But there's a certain ebb and flow, I think, to any relationship. And if you force it too hard, the customer senses that, I think.
100%. I mean, I think no one likes to get sold to, but people love to talk. And I think that those are very two distinctions. And people love to talk, and more importantly, they love to be listened. They know that the other person's listening. So, keeping those three things in mind, it's kind of, backwards thinking, but like a salesperson should do their best not to speak a lot of the times.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I'm as guilty as anybody. Just as you're talking, I'm thinking about what I want to say,
Yeah.
And
we all are.
Yeah. And over the years, I've tried to get better, but I'm trying to put myself in the situation now as you're talking, like, listen, let someone complete a sentence, right? Absorb what they're saying and then respond, right? Versus just cutting them off. And you see that a lot, actually.
Totally. I mean, I do it in my daily life all the time. When I'm communicating with like my wife, for instance, there's times where I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk over her. And I always have to, really work on, drinking my own Kool-Aid, so to speak, and really saying, okay, wait your turn, F your good idea, or your point, or whatever that may be, and take a beat and make sure that you're listening and you're validating everything. Because I think that's the key, is validation is everything. In personal relationships and business relationships. And if you don't have that, you're kind of just telling the person, I'm not listening to you and I only care about what I have to say.
No, I'm laughing now because you got me thinking, this podcast, not this episode, but I've had some guests that won't even let me get a word in edgewise. And people that listen to this say, Paul, that guy wouldn't shut up. He just wouldn't, I kept trying to interject, and I just, after a while, just like let him go. He wasn't listening to a word I was saying.
Yeah. And then what is that? It's just a waste of everyone's time. And I think that can happen a lot, especially on sales calls. And I think the best thing to keep in mind is that, like, if you're a seller and your buyer wants to be that person that talks, like, well, okay, you're in that role that you got to just let them go. You got to let them go, because like you're taking notes and you're going, okay, I'm going to get 5 minutes tops to speak at the end of we had a 30-minute call. They spoke for 20, 25. I got 5 minutes. I hope I was listening and taking notes while they were talking, and I got some things to say. And there's your time. And that's where like my stand-up skills come in, is because now I have the opportunity to say the most effective and efficient thing in the least amount of words. I always like to make most of my calls 15 minutes long, because I don't want more time than that. People's time is valuable. 15 minutes also allows me to pack in a lot of different sales calls in a single day. But it's like, it should be enough for you to get your point across. And if you can't, elevator pitch yourself, and especially these early calls, you should, the most time that you should be giving is for the client to tell you all the information you need to know. And then you're able to hit them with that whopper at the end that goes, oh, I gotta hear more of what this guy's got to say.
Yeah. So your program, I'm assuming it's a structured program where you have, you go in based on the customer's needs. You can tailor it to what they're looking for. Is that my understanding
Yeah.
this?
So we have everybody complete a pre-event survey. We make it very robust, and we say, hey, listen, this might seem a bit long, but it's on purpose. You're investing money into this, so we want you to invest a lot of thought as well into it, because that's what we're going to be doing on our back end. We're going to make sure that every single thing that we're doing, every improv game, every improv exercise or applied stand-up exercise that we're doing is going to be relevant, and it's going to allow your team to say, in the moment, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And then at the end we go, well, this is why. And they go, that makes sense. And I always say, like, role play is sometimes, like, when I was in more of a official sales role, I would do role play with all of my reps, and that is more acting than improv.
Yeah.
Which is funny. You're like, okay, I'm the salesperson and you're my rep. And it's like, even you acting as the salesperson, you're acting as like a version of yourself. And I like to say that's like your 9 to 5 personality. And so when you're doing improv, you're more being your 5 to 9 personality, and you're allowing yourself to kind of take all of the stress, all of the pressure out of it, and really be yourself, and then go, oh, that's why that's relevant. And what's really cool about laughter is when you laugh, it's like a mile marker for your brain. When you laugh, you're able to retain more information when it's associated with a laugh. So when we're doing these exercises, not only are they effective because it's a more effective version of role play, but it's also accompanied by laughter, and that allows you to remember it when the time comes and you gotta do it. I like to say it's a lot like in the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, and you're like, why the hell am I doing this? And then suddenly you're blocking a kick from the Cobra Kai and you're winning a championship.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great analogy, by the way. So as a follow-up, you go and you do your training. Are there any metrics that you are trying to gather, like after the fact, like 6 months down the road, a year down the road? How do you quantify and qualify what you've done?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how much they want to open the kimono, so to speak. But what I would say is, I always ask for talk time. Are you able to tell me do you use Gong or something like that to track your calls? And what is your average talk time from your team or individual reps, whatever you want to look at? And then let's look at this maybe shortly after, 6 months down the road, unless you're continuing to invest. And this is what I also say to people, like, sure, we might do this in like a sales kickoff, which is a very popular time, or like quarterly business review, like moments where it's like, hey, let's regroup ahead of the quarter. But this is an exercise, and we have programs that say, hey, we can do these things virtually to get your team to continue to work on these soft skills. So if you want to say, hey, let's measure this in 6 months, I'll say, all right, what are we doing? Are we going to keep doing stuff every month?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in person, but like, are we creating a program? Are we doing that one big program to start so everyone buys into it and gets it? And then we're going to do kind of micro programs throughout virtually to keep people engaged and involved. Then let's measure it on a 6-month basis. But if you're like, hey, let's measure it like within a month or something like that, or like what's the next month impact as it may be. So I think talk time is always the best thing to do, because that can really be an indicator of conversions, and at least like maybe not necessarily conversions from contract sent to closed won, but to, discovery call to demo, or from demo to contract sent, or proposal sent. So that's kind of where we look at is like, are we also bringing people through the pipeline more efficiently? Are we increasing those stage conversions rather than the sale conversion itself? Because there's obviously a lot of things we can't control, but at the very least, talk time is my favorite thing to look at.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great thoughts there. So, but in closing, how if someone would want to get in touch with you, how would they do that? Because I think we could talk for hours about this stuff, but I like to go for about a half hour if I can.
Yeah, we can always pick it up, have another one of these, but
I'd love to.
yeah, the best website is our website, is laugh.events. I got my shirt here. It's laugh dot, and then events is the com in this situation. So laugh.events is where your team can book a corporate event with us, and whether that's like, again, for sales kickoffs or individual breakouts for sessions or day-long trainings, we do all of that stuff, and that's done through our website, laugh.events. If anyone's looking to get, understanding and just loves this idea that humor is very valuable and believes in the power of using comedy skills, we have a great newsletter called Laugh RX, and to get there is laughrx.laugh.events. And I basically try to bring expose comedians and how those comedians can help you learn more about how you can apply those skills to the professional world, and try to back it up with neuroscience as much as we can, and medical journals, things like that, to just validate what we're doing. And then, if you're ever interested in individual coaching or just want to connect with me, LinkedIn's the best way to do that, or email. My LinkedIn is my name, Kevin Hubschmann, and my email is kevin@laugh.events.
Yeah. No, I love what you're doing. And I got to believe, I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there doing it, but there's probably not a lot of people doing what you're doing.
I didn't invent improv.
Yeah.
And it's been around for years and years, and it's been used in corporate settings. And the way that we try to differentiate ourselves is that my background is not in theater. My background is in the corporate environment, and my background is specifically also in sales. So I have that knowledge and that expertise in knowing what is important to people and what that process is like. I still sell every day. I run my own business. I know what it's like. And we try to go heavy on the professional development if that's what the team is looking for. So it's less like, hey, this is how you can use this skill in life. It's like, no, this is how you can use it when you're talking to a customer. And you can hear from, our conversation, I know all of those different details as it relates to the life cycle of a sale.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do and differentiate ourselves is we're focused on real professional growth and professional development.
Love it.
Rather than sort of broad team building and broad takeaways, but rather like really concrete takeaways that you can apply almost the next day.
Sounds good. Well, on that, we'll wrap it up here for on this episode of the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. Kevin, thanks for being on. Like I said, I think we could probably do another session if we'd like.
Well, I'm ready for it whenever you want.
All right. Well, that's a wrap for Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. This is Paul DeLegro signing off. Till next time.